Before this video starts, if you enjoy this video, there are many more like it already on the channel, with many more like it to come in the future, so subscribe. I'm trying to hit 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so I would really appreciate it. I upload 6 days a week on this channel, so if you're looking for some consistent basketball talk, this is the place for it. Also, drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and it makes a massive difference. A few weeks ago, I did a 2K talk on my predictions for the 2020 playoffs, and I ended up picking the Los Angeles Clippers to be the team to win the title, and I wanted to do a video on this today to put more focus and attention on it than you typically get in a 2K talk. There are 3 real contenders in the NBA this year, with some potential dark horses that I will talk about in a video on Thursday. Those 3 contenders being both of the LA teams and the Milwaukee Bucks. And today I'm going to talk about why I am picking the Clippers to overcome both of those teams. So let's get into it. Now, it only feels appropriate to open this video by talking about the Lakers versus the Clippers, being that they very recently played just the second regulation game we've seen in months, where the Lakers beat the Clippers. And when you look at the regular season matchups that these teams have had, the Lakers have got the best of them the last 2 times, barely lost the first 2 times, and people on Twitter seem to believe that this was significant. Here's the thing. What does the Lakers playing very well against the Clippers in their last 2 matchups likely mean for their playoff matchup? Absolutely nothing. Like, it doesn't matter at all. And that goes both ways. If the Clippers were fucking 4-0 in the regular season against the Lakers, I wouldn't use that as evidence for them to win. There are plenty of examples of teams playing well or even winning a regular season series and then even getting swept in the playoffs. It's a different situation then, and it's especially a different situation now in the bubble in Orlando. And another part about how this goes both ways in terms of not meaning anything, LeBron James has shot horribly versus the Clippers in the regular season. But I don't expect that to be the case in the playoffs, like, whatsoever. Different contexts, different scenarios. And I actually do want to point out something in relation to that about this specific game that was just played. Like, yes, the Clippers didn't have Lou Will or Montrezl Harrell, but also LeBron isn't going to be that bad scoring-wise in a matchup against the team in the playoffs. Like, as much of a meme as LeBron made it, playoff LeBron is a very real thing. And I don't care how ridiculously good the wing defense of the Clippers is, LeBron James is going to play well in that series, or at the very least not going to play nearly as bad as he has in the regular season against them. But when we look at the individual matchup, I would say that both of these teams have some mismatches. LeBron will probably be guarding Kawhi, and he seems to have decided he cares about defense again, so that shouldn't be a problem. But as much as I like Danny Green, with his size disadvantage, I don't expect him to be much of a problem for Pandemic P, which is a fucking hilarious nickname, by the way. And then this is not even factoring in Lou Williams. The closing lineup will likely include all 3 of these guys, and KCP and Danny Green will have to lock up both George and Lou, and I doubt that happens. Granted, Lou Williams has had some playoff struggles in the past. Hopefully those wings and strippers were some sort of magical cure for him. And then as for how the Clippers are going to defend the Lakers, Kawhi and PG are going to be at many times able to double LeBron James, which is a huge advantage. And then as for Anthony Davis, I don't think he's going to dominate to nearly the degree that people say he's going to. I think Zubac, first of all, is a good matchup against Davis, and I think he's going to get a lot of minutes in this series because of that. He's a big body. They can throw at Davis if he's going off, and even if Davis is doing well, post-up offense, unless it's just a massive mismatch, still isn't the most efficient offense in the league, to say the least. And if I had to choose one matchup to have on lock between a big man and a perimeter player, I'm choosing that perimeter player in LeBron James. This isn't 1983. Post-ups are not dead in the NBA, however, it is not anywhere close to one of the top 3 best plays in the league for the last decade plus, which is give the ball to LeBron. So if I'm choosing between one of these 2 to have a good matchup on, it's LeBron James. So I think both teams are going to have one good matchup and one bad matchup, and the best player on each team has a good matchup for them, and the second best does not. But as I'm sure Lakers fans are tired of hearing, what this matchup is really going to come down to is depth. Like, LeBron and Anthony Davis are a considerably better duo to me than Kawhi and Paul George. Now, when you reference my top 50 players currently in the NBA that everyone universally loved, don't look at the comments. LeBron is the second best player in the league to me, and Davis is the 7th best, whereas with Kawhi and PG, I have Kawhi as the best player in the league, but Paul George as just the 14th best player in the league. However, while the Lakers win the duo, they do not win the title of the best overall team. Now, I don't think the difference in depth is nearly as significant as people make it out to be. The Lakers have some pretty good defenders off of the bench. Alex Caruso is more than ironically good. Dwight Howard would be in contention for 6th Man of the Year if that award didn't just universally go to the best scorer off of the bench every season. And KCP was a pretty good bench piece. However, that is unfortunately now not the case because he's starting in place of Avery Bradley. However, with the Clippers, they have Landry Shamet, who's a knockdown shooter, JaMychal Green, who is a very good 3-and-D big man, Reggie Jackson, who isn't amazing at anything but isn't bad at anything either, and of course 2 6th Men of the Year candidates who have great chemistry together. And specifically offensively, when you get past LeBron and Davis, it gets really sad. Like, we are seeing regular season games where the Lakers are legitimately heavily relying on fucking Gummy Bears himself to bail them out on offense. It's actually been working quite a bit, but I don't expect it to hold up. And it is because of that difference that I believe the Clippers will beat the Lakers in the playoffs, but with all of that being said, it's not going to be an easy win by any means. For both this series and the Bucks series, it's going to be close. I think we can all agree that this is going to be a pretty tight playoffs. And since I mentioned the Bucks, let's go ahead and talk about them now. This one is interesting because I think in the case of both of the LA teams, people have been so focused on that matchup that they haven't even considered what those teams are going to do once they get into the finals. Everyone's focused on that conference finals matchup, not what is going to happen after the fact. The reason I think this series will be interesting is really just because it comes down to how well the Clippers are going to adjust to matching the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, in the case of AD, I think just Zubac alone with your ability to slow down LeBron with the wing defense and bring some good help should be enough, but with Giannis, because he starts his attack on the perimeter rather than just in the low post, it takes more than just a big body in the right place. What I would do first of all is start JaMychal Green over Marcus Morris, which really should be the case anyway because he's better than Marcus Morris. Green isn't actually bigger than Morris, but he plays like he is. Like, he's more physical and more capable of protecting the rim and defending big men. But that's just one piece of the puzzle. See, I think the Raptors last year showed the best technique to defend Giannis. Basically, you put a wall in front of the basket with your bigs and harass him on the perimeter with your wing defenders. In the case of the Clippers, they don't have the kind of bodies the Raptors did, Gasol, Ibaka, and Siakam. They have Zubac, who is big and I do think will be a huge factor, but isn't nearly as smart of a defender as Gasol and Ibaka, and after that, Green, Morris, and Montrezl Harrell are much smaller defenders. But Zubac and Green, or sometimes Zubac and Harrell, and you'll unfortunately have to do some Harrell and Morris, that should be big enough to at least be alright. They make up for an at least serviceable wall in front of the basket, but in this case, Toronto really had just Kawhi harass Giannis on the perimeter. Now they have Kawhi and Paul George. And now in this case, even though Chris Middleton did play poorly in that Raptors series, it was really just because he played poorly. The Raptors didn't defend him particularly well. But now in this case, the Clippers can put one of Kawhi or George on him because one of them is going to be defending Giannis. And that's going to be huge. Because as good as Middleton is, and I think he gets a little bit too much flack, I feel pretty confident that Paul George can lock up Middleton, and we already have seen how much Eric Bledsoe shits himself in the first 3 rounds of the playoffs. Now imagine how much he will shit himself in the finals. The NBA will need to have people on standby with shovels to clean up the metric tons of shit that Eric Bledsoe is going to have coming out of his pants if he's in an actual final series. So I think the Clippers have the capacity to slow down Giannis, or at the very least make him no better than he is normally, which of course is already great, but he wouldn't be performing better than his already insane self. But they also have the ability to completely shut down Chris Middleton, in my opinion, and then outside of those two, there's not much offense for the Bucks outside of a spot-up jump shot. So basically it's going to be a one-man show for Milwaukee, whereas with the Clippers, it's going to be Kawhi and Paul George, and I don't think those guys are going to struggle against the Bucks defense. At least I don't think one of them will, because we saw how Kawhi played played against the Bucks last year. I would say Paul George might struggle because he's prone to do that from time to time in the playoffs. However, with Milwaukee's defensive scheme specifically, I think PG could be okay because the Bucks are one of the leading teams in the league in three-pointers allowed, and half of George's shots come from outside. A good percentage of the other half is fast breaks, so he might not be able to slash inside all that much, but I still think he could have a good series versus the Bucks. So I think the Clippers can slow down Giannis, or at the very least make him pretty much a neutral, and they can completely shut down Middleton and pretty much the rest of this Bucks roster, while I also don't believe that those two stars for the Clippers are really going to struggle in this series. And that isn't even to mention the fact that, once again, they are a much deeper team. And while I have pointed out that I think this Clippers team is a little too reliant on making tough shots, they are also the best team in the league at making tough shots, and when facing the best defense in the league, that will be very valuable. So that is why I believe the Clippers are going to win the 2020 NBA Championship. That is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.